Presenting today's webinar, A New Approach to Business Partner Management, learn how GNC automates repeatable tasks between their customers and vendors to reduce costs, save time, and strengthen partnerships, are Richard Wiljum, VP of Sales and Marketing, and Kip Kopelke, Account Manager at Traverse Systems, along with GNC's Marty Hahn, Director of Vendor Relations, and Laurel Custer, Senior Analyst of Vendor Relations. So without further ado, I am pleased to turn the presentation over to our first presenter. Take it away, Richard.
Good. Thank you, Patty. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Marty, Laurel, Kip, and myself, I'd like to thank you not only for your time today, but for your interest in our session. We at Traverse Systems have a 17-year relationship with the good folks of our RVCF, and it's great to see such a good turnout today, and also to see some names that we have had the pleasure of working with over the years. As Patty indicated, our session is titled A New Approach to Business Partner Management. And in that session, we have two objectives. Number one, we want to share with you our new platform, Rivet, which is a business process automation solution. And number two, probably more importantly, is to share with you the journey Marty, Laurel, and the rest of the GNC team are on with Rivet to automate repeatable tasks, to eliminate any non-value add activities so that they can save time and cost, as well as delight their customers. So that being said, here's what we got planned for you today. We're going to do introductions, and after that, I'm going to give you the briefest of overview of Traverse Systems and Rivet. After that, we're going to dive into the core of the presentation, which is the 4 use cases that the GNC team are currently utilizing or about to utilize with this solution. And after that, Kip is going to give you a brief overview, brief presentation of Rivet. And at that point, we should have probably about 10-15 minutes for questions and answers. So thank you again for your time. Kip, if I get you to advance. Let's start with introductions. And of course, ladies first. Laurel, would you go?
Hi, my name is Laurel Custer. I'm the Senior Analyst for the Vendor Relations team at GNC. And basically my job is to make sure that the Vendor Relations team has all of the reports and tools that they need to maintain all of our relationships with vendors and wholesale partners.
Thank you. Marty?
And I am Marty Hahn. I am the Director of Vendor Relations for GNC. Takes on an interesting role with GNC, which we'll get into a little bit later in some of the slides. But GNC is a retailer, obviously with a lot of stores, but we also are a vendor to different retailers and wholesale channels. So we kind of walk both lines. So you'll see some of the things in Rivet that I think will go on both sides of the fence to basically meet our needs as well, and hopefully meet yours.
Thank you, Marty. Kip?
Good afternoon, I believe, to most everyone. Could be good morning, late morning for some folks. My name is Kip Kopelke. Been with Traverse Systems now for 2 years as an account manager. Prior to that, I spent 18 years with Kohl's department stores, and I think some of the project management tips and just the features within Rivet itself would be a very helpful tool for a lot of folks in pretty much any industry. So just very excited to kind of showcase some of what we've got available.
Thank you, Kip. And I'm Richard Wiljum. I head up sales and marketing for Traverse Systems. Unlike most of my colleagues, I come from the traditional software industry, but most of the folks you'll talk to at Traverse Systems are either former vendors or former retailers. And I think you'll see that reflected in our solutions as well, too. Kip, can I get you to advance to the next slide? As I indicated, the briefest overview of Traverse Systems, whether you are a retailer, a vendor, or a RVCF member, hopefully you've heard of Traverse Systems at this point. Founded 21 years ago, formerly Compliance Networks, you may have known us by, went through a rebrand in the 2018 timeframe. 3 main solutions. The first is our flagship, which is the platform, which automates the vendor performance process for retailers. Next is Passport, is a subscription service for vendors that gives them additional or deeper visibility into reporting and their supply chain performance. And finally, Rivet is what we're here to talk to you about today. Some of our customers, hopefully you not only are familiar with, but also frequent as well too. Kip, next slide. So along that 21-year journey with in the retail supply chain, as you can imagine, we've seen a multitude of processes that we could describe as anywhere from mildly inefficient to just downright horrific. And typically they have three characteristics. Number one, they're extremely informal and manual, and for the most part held together by spreadsheets, by email, and by tribal knowledge. The second is that they span across not only multiple departments, but multiple companies. And hey, this is supply chain, multiple continents too, right? And the third piece is they have tremendous amount of data that typically needs a lot of hand-holding and caring and correcting and so forth. So given these opportunities, we decided to go out and look at what a business process automation solution would look like. And Kip, if I get you to advance. As we were doing that, and from the day that the founders started the company, we've always challenged ourselves with this question. If a task or process doesn't require human judgment, why is a human doing it? So with enough prodding from retailers, vendors, customers, prospects, we set out to answer that question. Not only answer that question, but to free teams from inefficient, repeatable, but very necessary tasks so that they can engage in higher value activities. So with that, Rivet was founded. Next slide, please. And in addition to saving both time and money, we really believe Rivet's value proposition is to be able to do just that. Free your teams from these tasks so that they can engage both with your customers and your vendors. It's a solution for both in those higher value conversations. Less transactional, less tactical, more strategic. And I know it sounds cliche, but now more than ever, we believe that is important going forward for higher performing business relationships. So that's a little bit about Rivet. We have a poll question. This is a marketing research question. I appreciate everyone's participation in it. And we just kind of want to get a feel in terms of what repeatable task would you like to automate most? What task or what process gives you the biggest headaches? And we'll start with the first, vendor supplier onboarding. The next couple ones are kind of annual ones, terms and conditions. Annual certificates could be certificates of insurance, something along those lines. The compliance review process and any additional contract programs and approval. So we'll pause now for a second and let those results come in. And again, I appreciate your participation.
Is this where we do the Jeopardy theme song? Wait.
I'm not sure what it is. I'll leave that to Patty.
You may go ahead and hum the theme song if you wish, Richard. I think that would be a lot of fun. We do have at this point, we have 64% of our attendees have voted. So I do encourage you to vote in the poll. We'll give it another 30 seconds.
Okay.
And I'll keep my eye on the clock.
See how good my internal clock is. I'll try and be ready to share my screen again as soon as you're ready, Patty.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, team, I am going to share the results. So I am closing the poll, and let's share the results. Richard, are you able to see them, or shall I read them out to you?
I am.
Perfect.
Interested. Thank you very much, folks, for your participation. We kind of suspected that was the case, but wanted to confirm it. And again, appreciate your response. Okay, Kip, if I could go to the next slide. And the slide after that.
Okay, advancing, there we go.
So enough about Traverse Systems. Now for the stars of the show, Marty and Laurel. I can tell you we went to Marty maybe at the beginning of the year and said, Marty, we've got a new solution. We would like to bounce it off you. It's to automate your vendor onboarding process. And Marty took a look at it and said, not so fast. Okay, looks like a great solution, but I've got 3 other uses for it, or 3 other use cases for it. So on the screen, what you see are the 4 use cases. 3 are in action. 1 is future, and Marty and Laura are going to talk to about it. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from the presentation today is that if you look at these 4 separate use cases, these 4 separate outcomes, just know that it's the same platform. Rivet is a highly configurable, highly flexible solution. And that's what gets us so excited about it, is that it is not rigid code. We can go just about into any repeatable process. And if you can provide us the data, we can make good sense of it and automate it as well too. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Marty. And Kip, if you could advance to the next slide.
Thank you, Richard. So I wanted to put this slide in here that really kind of shows an overview of where GNC is at right now and what GNC stands for. So our promise really is to everybody, the body. The biggest thing about GNC is, and what our marching orders are from our senior leadership really is to focus on letting the consumer find our product where the consumer shops. So we have our huge store base across the country and globally. And the idea behind that store base is to educate consumers on healthy diets, healthy nutrition, and we have coaches within all of our stores that can help you support that. The idea, though, is that, you know, we realize today shoppers don't necessarily shop and have to go to a GNC store. And we sell online, but we also know that our shoppers go to various different companies, Walmart, they'll shop at Kohl's, they'll shop at Target, they'll shop at the grocery store. So let us get the products to them where they need to be shopping, and where they can readily find them. What that has done, and what makes, I think makes GNC unique, is there's been vendors out there in the marketplace who have traditionally sold to retailers, but then opened up a store or two and have started to sell retail. We are a traditional retailer. We have an 87-year history, and we've been retail for 86 of those years. And we are now looking to do wholesale and really get into the wholesale business in a huge way. Well, that's created some growing pains. So we're going to kind of go through some of these case studies that are really some programs that we did because of our need on both sides of that fence. So, and basically, we are really trying to take processes out of the mix and make those processes systematically driven and be able to monitor them and be able to track where they're going. So Kip, if you could go to the next slide, we'll go through the first case study of our 4 different programs. So I'm going to kind of go through the initial piece of this, which is the process overview of what our review was, what we were looking to do. And I'll go through the challenges that we were facing, and then Laurel will take it from there on each one and go through what Rivet delivered to the process and what kind of results we found. So our first, as Richard mentioned, the first thing that we were talking with our Traverse team was, you know, let's look at vendor onboarding. And we said, you know what, I don't think we want to start out of the gate with vendor onboarding. That's a very big task and a lot of moving parts. What we want to do is we want to kind of learn from the program and then build from the program and get critical mass from our own internal users. So we started first with this program, which is called Corrective Action. Now, to give you a little bit behind the scenes of what corrective action for GNC is because we deal with supplements, vitamins, proteins, there are cases where customers will call our customer service group, and they will tell our customer service group that there happens to be some sort of product that either they didn't like the way it looked, it smelled funny, maybe it made them even feel a little nauseous, or the way they took it. So we didn't really have a great process to manage those complaints. They would come in, we would put them in a spreadsheet, we would then create a corrective action document, also in a spreadsheet. We would send that out to our vendors. Our vendor would then, well, let me step back a second. Our vendor sometimes would respond to that spreadsheet. If they weren't, we were emailing and following up with that vendor. If they weren't again, we were emailing and following up with that vendor. So there's a constant gap there that was created by us having to do that. Then there was also these spreadsheets. So the vendor would send back some information. Sometimes it wouldn't be completely filled out. Now there's further emails. You got 2 or 3 versions of the same spreadsheet they're coming across. We really lost a lot of consistency of what our vendors were doing so that we could close out some of these customer satisfaction needs and be able to get back to our own customers. So that's where the inconsistency of all the storage of all the documentation came from. So we really needed to make sure that we had some system that managed all that. So that's really the challenge, and what drove us to do that process. And then Laurel will take you through what the Rivet delivers for this.
Right. Yeah. I would say the biggest challenges were definitely all of the documents and storing them all in the same place, because ultimately we're responsible for that, and we have to be able to produce those documents 2 years from now if asked for them. So Rivet was able to give us a solution that stored all of the documents in one place where we can go in and we can find them, we can search, pull up, we can get all of them by vendor, we can pull up just a specific complaint. They're all stored in the Rivet server, so all the different types that we like, Excel and PDF and pictures, so they're all in one place, and it's awesome. Rivet was also able to streamline the communications with the vendor, which for me was the biggest win for this campaign. It was very manual before. We were writing each individual email, and Rivet really was able to take it and do most of that for me. So it was great. It really automated the entire process and eliminates the human error, and also eliminates the need to follow up with vendors every day or every week. It also provided visibility to senior management and really everybody involved with the process as to where we were. There's a lot of moving parts to this process, so there were a lot of different groups at GNC that were interested and invested in the final result, so it gives them the visibility they need without having to send an email or chat to somebody to ask the question. And yeah, really the results were, I'll skip the first one. The second one was, it really did reduce the workload on everybody that's close to this process. Me personally, it took it from 10 to 16 hours a week down to 2, usually less than 2, sometimes 2 if there's a lot of complaints, which is a huge win. The first one, also a huge win. It really added accountability for our vendors to respond. I think it added a structure to this process that wasn't there before, and the vendors take it more seriously and respond in a faster time frame. And what I found also was that vendors really were able to self-train. We came up with a training document that they all were sent whenever they were invited to the Rivet program, and they were able to self-train for the most part. I've only really had to jump on calls and do like training sessions with 2 vendors. So the system is very intuitive and easy to flow once you get it set up.
Good.
It works really well. And the good thing that and Kip, you can move to the next slide. I think the one thing that we found is, by doing a campaign of this situation, we were able to take some lessons and learnings from that process and put it into our next one, which this was a much larger program and a campaign to run. This was wholesale compliance. So really what this is in a nutshell is we were getting overages and shortages from the receipts that some of our wholesale customers were sending back from what we were sending, or the product that we were sending them. Our accounts receivable department was scratching their heads trying to understand what these receipts were. They didn't really have the resources to be able to go back to our DCs and start to talk about cycle counts or even understand where they needed to go. So we jumped in with the AR department and we worked through this process. Before we had this process, we did a lot of manual spreadsheets, and it was really trying to maintain all of the workflows and the way this was going through the workflow, because you get an order from the vendor or the retailer, you'd send that shipment to the retailer. Then by the time they received it, it's a few weeks later, they would actually process a shortage to you. So there's some tying of what that shortage is to which shipment it was. Then there's the process of going out to our own DCs, finding out through cycle counts whether we really made an error and we didn't ship it properly, or did we actually ship it properly and we believe we're in the right. Or also, do we need to reach out to our own transportation team? So now you have a whole nother group that's involved, and we're trying to find out what the BOD or the bill of lading was. So we need to pull that information together. And then we need to reach back out to the account. So we reach out to the account and we say, hey, we have everything that we need, and here's where we believe we're in the right. We present that to them. And in some cases, the account says, hey, you know what, we agree with you. In some cases, they say, no, we don't agree with you. And it needs to move on to different groups. So there's a lot of different processes and different groups that were along the way. And those different groups couldn't start their process until a previous process was completed. And by maintaining that in spreadsheets and with emails, you really didn't know what or when a complaint or dispute was in the stage and what stage it was in. So we decided to actually build this entire process around a Rivet campaign. And that's where Laurel came in with working with the Rivet team, and she was able to really develop this. And they were really instrumental in helping us develop this and work through the product flows to understand where we need to be and what we can put in so that the system does all of the, I think it goes back to what Richard's original statement was in question. You know, if a human doesn't need to be making the decision, why are they doing it? If we don't have to be going out to a vendor and reminding them, or a DC and reminding them 5 times to complete a task, let the system do that reminding of the task. So Laura, you want to take them through the capabilities?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, this one was, I will say, a little bit more challenging to work with right from the get-go, because there really were kind of several people doing this process several different ways. So once we got it streamlined and got it a good process flow worked out, what I think the big win, or what Rivet really helped us with, was adding the ownership and accountability to all parts of the process. So we had, with this campaign, we have several internal groups that have a part that they have to play, but then also at times there's external third-party groups that also are in Rivet using it as users, the same as GNC users. So it really added accountability to this process where there wasn't any before. We're able to, on a weekly basis, see where everything is very easily, see what tasks are open, and do the tracking much easier than we ever could before. It's also providing an at-a-glance tracking to Marty and management to on open issues, to see where it's getting stuck, if it's getting stuck, so that they can answer the questions that they're being asked. And then it's also provided reporting and visibility that we didn't have before at all. in the form of just the fields that the information we're asking. So we ask the right information from the people doing the process, and then all of that is available to use as data. So the reporting has been greatly improved. The results of this one, there's been substantial improvement in data integrity, which I just touched on. But I would say also the time it takes for us to work through these, and as everybody adopted the process, the time it takes to enter them and deal with them on a weekly basis. There's much less following up on everything and going down through spreadsheets, and more just getting the job done. And finally, replacing all of the spreadsheets, which that was like a personal win for me, because if we can get rid of colorful spreadsheets, that's my favorite day.
Yeah, she's not joking when she says colorful spreadsheets. They were multicolored. They were like a rainbow looking at it, an eyesore. Kip, do you want to move us to the next slide? This is I find personally my favorite one that we've done so far. The reason why I find it is my favorite one is this goes back to us being a retailer becoming a vendor. We had literally no process to handle a return from a wholesaler back to us. And sometimes we would have where we would ship, let's say we were supposed to ship, and I'll keep it simple. We were supposed to ship 10 boxes to a retailer, and that retailer would say, well, you sent me 20. I need to send 10 back. They'd call the buyer would say, go ahead and send them back. They would send them back. No one knew what was coming back. No one had any idea. The DC would just think it's a receipt. They would look to try and over-receive it again. It was causing a nightmare. Then there would be some major returns that we would do where our salesperson would get involved. They would organize a major return with a wholesale account. They would go ahead and process the return. It would come back, the DCs would receive it. Next thing you know, we're either shortaged, or even if we did receive it completely, no one bothered to tell the accounts payable and finance departments that, hey, you know what, we got this return. So all of a sudden they're looking at these large accounting misses and trying to backtrack to work their way back into what really took place to cause us to get us to this point of where we have a credit or an outstanding debit that we need to work on. So we had literally no visibility to our TVs. And it seemed like such a basic process that we should have been able to do. We had no tracking of the item, so that, like I said, things would get back to the DCs. They really wouldn't know what to do with it. And then the workload that was going on the finance world was just overwhelming, and we were spending hours upon hours really just backtracking into what took place to get us to this point before we even found out where those funds should be rightly accounted for. So we got together, Laurel put together with all the teams involved and put together this return to vendor campaign, which I think has been, to me, it's a huge win for us as a company.
Yeah, and I think this one really demonstrates the power of Rivet in that this process isn't any one person's job or even a big part of their job. It's just like a little thing that you have to do through your day. So it was easily forgotten. It was easily just pushed off until the last minute. I think one of the most powerful things about Rivet is that it gets the task to the person when they need to see it in the right order. So instead of a giant email chain that you're following that has 20 people on it, you're only getting the task to create the call tag when you need to create the call tag. So this one really took all of the very simple little chunks of things that needed to happen and made them very linear and simple. We don't really have results for this one yet. It just recently launched, but the accounting department had no visibility to this before, so they will definitely see a benefit getting the reports at the end of the process, and the distribution centers also. And then ultimately, we'll be able to have analytics to run trends on where we're actually taking these returns back from, why the stuff is getting returned. We just didn't have any visibility into that before, so this will give us that.
Great. Kip, you want to move to the next on our biggest one? That this is a future. This is one we are currently working on with the Traverse team. This is a biggie, and I know some of the individuals on the webinar today are undertaking a vendor onboarding program, and obviously based on the poll results, a lot of you are interested in a vendor onboarding program or a retailer account onboarding program. This is obviously a big need for us as well. We don't, and we still currently do not have a very smooth process of bringing on a vendor. It is something that our buyer basically does. It's been changed, and now it's the merchants are doing it. So now we have two different teams basically trying to handhold one vendor, and some of the processes that was thought to be a buyer are now moving over to merchants, and the merchants are confused on whether they should do it or it's still being done by the buyer. So there's a lot of confusion, which everybody knows creates a lot of opportunity for gaps in the process. And it doesn't make for a very good experience for any vendor that when they're starting with a new account to be left in the lurch to understand what the needs are or what they should do next with a retailer. And unfortunately, what happens in some cases is you get these fire drills where all of a sudden a vendor is being requested to get some document or provide some information at the 11th hour, and now they're trying to scramble within their company because this retailer didn't know what they were doing. GNC really doesn't want to be that retailer. So we know that there's multiple departments of vendor onboarding for us that we know of. We know it definitely touches the merchants. We know it definitely touches the buyers. We also have a science team because of the products that we deal with. We have a legal team that gets involved with not just the contracts, but different aspects of the product, the labels, approval of labeling of products. We have our risk team that gets involved with the insurances. Science also gets involved with approving factories and making sure that we have the right documentation and certificates from our factories. There's a lot of different teams. So we knew there was a lot of different moving parts that needed to be from the beginning to get us to the end of when we were ready to get a contract signed. So we wanted to make sure we had a good, clean tool that could do this because our current tools that we were doing were incomplete. And we really, literally, in some cases, we had people, obviously now we're more remote, but we literally had merchants or buyers walking around documents, getting them signed off by senior VPs or VPs so that they could move the process along. So it was really difficult for a merchant or buyer or anyone else in this whole grand scheme of things who had other roles that they were playing, that's their day-to-day jobs, that were trying to make sure that they were bringing a new retailer or a new vendor onto the piece of what needs to be done. We realize that we need to, when we're dealing with new vendors, speed to shelf is the key part. We want to be the first to bring something new to the table. So if any delay takes place or anything gets missed with bringing a new vendor on board, we lose that opportunity. So that's just one more piece. You can see this is vendor onboarding. We are, once we get our feet underneath us and we get this vendor onboarding launched, the next thing we're going to be working on is retailer onboarding. So from our wholesale side, we can do the same thing, and we can kind of put that into a structured process. So Laura, do you want to take through the capabilities on this one?
Yeah, I think a lot of the capabilities are similar to the other one. It just standardizes a process that was not before. This one definitely, it will standardize the process, not just for internal GNC folks, but for new vendors who are just dealing with GNC for the first time. So it's always I think it will streamline and ultimately make GNC look better to new vendors that are coming on. The data entry will be normalized and minimized. Definitely, we're hopefully going to be able to attach Rivet to another internal system to automate even more. All of this is still in the works, but and a single repository for data it's the same as the other campaigns. I think it just gives everybody the visibility to see where it is in the process and whose bucket it's in. I will say there have been several, we'll call them sub campaigns, that have kind of come to light out of this one, where certain parts of a process seem like they're almost their own process. So maybe, you know, they're getting split out into different areas of the business, and I feel like we're constantly finding ways to improve other parts of the business with Rivet. So I mean, the ideas keep coming. But yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, Laurel just hit the last nail on the head right there. There's other opportunities that keep coming. The more we reach out with other teams within GNC and we bring them on during conversations with our different programs that we've done, they're now bringing pieces to us that they want us to build Rivet campaigns around. So I saw in some previous thing there was a conversation about franchisee, how to bring on franchisees. And we've had probably every meeting that we've been in with a different group in GNC talking about a Rivet campaign. One of the things that comes up from that group is, what are we doing? How are we going to do this for something for our franchisees in whatever aspect that is? So we know that there's plenty. This program is endless to the different avenues that we can work through. So we're really excited to be moving on and on with the different Rivet campaigns. And with that, Richard, I will turn it back over to you.
Laurel and Marty, thank you both for your testimonial. To those of you in the audience, as you can imagine, putting a session together like this takes a little bit of time. These two have been unbelievable in granting time, especially this time of the year, right? So thank you both for your participation. We certainly appreciate it. At this point, we're going to give you, Kip's going to run you through a brief overview of Rivet and show you some of the screens. So Kip, if you want to take it from here.
Sounds good. And as much as I'd like to be sharing my screen right now, because the camera makes me look a lot taller than I really am in real life, I am looking on a third monitor off to the right, and you're just going to see the side of my head. So I'm going to stay off until we get towards the end and help answer some of the questions and just showcase the actual material itself. So GNC did a great job of just talking through or identifying what those opportunities were within their organization, and kind of why they're doing what they're doing and how Rivet is helping them. I'm just going to walk you through a little bit then of a foundational look and feel of just what the application looks like, a couple of screenshots, and just some of the high points of what this thing can do for you. But as you've heard, really removing all of those extra steps and teams and processes and just putting it all in a one-stop shop, right? Whoever says that they want to have things fragmented and all over the place, it is nice to have a single repository for that information and the communications, and I think Rivet does just that. Repeatable processes, we'll talk about it in a minute, that you can set up some of these campaigns and create a blueprint from them and repurpose them ever so slightly and just continue to reuse. We talked about new vendor onboarding is probably one of those big ones. There's several vendors every month, every year that you're bringing on. Really important to be able to have a process or this onboarding that you just kick off a new campaign to that recipient and keep reusing all the work that you did up front and benefit on the back end of not having to set that whole thing up over and over again or create yet another spreadsheet with fun colors on it in order to manage the process. So you heard them talk a little bit about campaigns. Campaigns kind of is that project. So it's just the Rivet name for campaigns. So you see just a couple of key features and kind of a slight definition here. I'll focus a little bit on campaigns, dashboard, the inbox, and one of the other things I think is kind of fun is the weighted and timed tasks component, where you can really set deadlines. I mean, nobody ever really just goes out and completes everything without being told kind of when this is due or what level of priority some of these different steps have, and you can build that into this as well. So again, there's many different features, but I'm going to highlight just a handful of them here and make sure that we're leaving time for questions on the back end. So I'm going to proceed. So here you're going to see just a couple of screenshots. Campaigns is really kind of where it all starts. So this is that really high level. We talked about new vendor or new supplier setup is probably one of those biggest campaigns that you could build, and that would be the overarching naming convention of it. But what's really kind of fun is there's modules and tasks and things that live underneath that. And some of the examples of what a module might be is you can kind of chunk groups of questions together and create kind of modules or kind of an overarching theme for those different sets of questions. And it makes it a little bit easier to kind of move through that as a recipient or somebody on the receiving end to go through those different campaigns and complete it in a timely fashion. So one example, we talked about a campaign, new vendor or new supplier setup. Examples of modules could be, the vendor setup as far as just your basic vendor name, payment terms, allowances, different stuff. You could even have, an EDI module. You could have a transportation or warehouse location module, and just everything that you need to collect, you can build them into those little different chunks. Tasks, like I said, under that vendor setup module could be, I need your vendor information, payment terms, allowance terms, freight terms, all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of see where that starts to build out into tasks. And then there's individualized questions underneath there. So what is your name, your email, your phone, your address, all that typical stuff. Are you a national or a domestic versus an import vendor? Could be, are you a net 30, net 60, net 90? Do you have a new store discount? And you could just kind of configure all that different stuff. Prepaid versus collect are things that are assignment type questions and really designed to kind of collect all that information, again, in that single repository. Very customizable. A lot of the different examples and opportunities that GNC pulled together, they're all off of this one single platform, and they have the flexibility in their configuration to customize this and have it do many different things, from adding something that the recipient needs to upload and then turn around and download, or maybe I got that backwards, download something first that GNC provided, but then turn around and upload something back to them. And you can define whether that's a JPEG, an Excel document, or a zip file, any of that kind of good stuff. So really customizing it and being able to do whatever is most important. Data validation, things like, hey, I'm collecting an email address. I want to make sure that that is a true and valid email address that has a @something.com suffix, right? So it's looking for syntax, for dates, for emails, all that kind of thing. Rules-based could be confusing just because that name rule could be many different things, but the way that Rivet defines a rule-based campaign is really looking at, you can define, my first question is, are you a domestic or an import vendor? You can imagine that there's different sets of questions and things that I need to know of your FOB point and how long on the water, or what's your transit time, or different things that I need to know for an import versus a domestic that might be living in the West Coast or East Coast. So you can direct your questions based on how they respond to one. You can take them down different paths. So kind of utilizing those decision points. And then, as I mentioned earlier, really love those due dates. You can throw deadlines out, and it'll help remind people, are you at risk or overdue for getting some of those assignments in. So next screen is just kind of another subset of the campaigns, really kind of looking at, the prime example of that new supplier onboarding, different types. You can assign it to an individual. So maybe new vendor onboarding might not be the best to do just to an individual, because there's a whole group of people that probably need to be involved, but you can set up campaigns to be sent to an individual, to a group, to an enterprise is what we call it, or kind of, that whole company. Status, you can utilize different aspects of it. So am I in draft mode or am I published mode? Am I in sandbox? So even though I'm published, because I think this is done, I'm in sandbox, and I'm going to test it out once or twice with some internal folks. I know I like to do that. I want to see what this thing is going to look like and how is it behaving before I send it out to everybody. And you can take something in a sandbox mode for 1 or 2 attempts and just see what it looks like, unpublish, make your tweaks, and then get it out there in a true production status. Reoccurrence, I mentioned that earlier, just really looking at new supplier onboarding. You don't want to do it as just a one-time. You're going to set that thing up to be reoccurring in some way, shape, or form, so that you can either reuse that campaign, or maybe it's every 2 years I need a new signed terms and agreements, and I need that signature and I need validation that you're agreeing to it for the next 2 years again, you can schedule these things to go out without you even having to get involved. So really neat, the base functionality of this thing and what the teams are really trying to build into it so that it's very customizable, and once you get in and start building them, you can have this thing manage so many of those tasks without having to set calendar reminders, send emails, manage spreadsheets, and all the different teams. So really kind of fun stuff there. So as I've built those campaigns, so I talked about kind of just the base premise of it. Some of the next things that are nice is you can configure and send alert emails. So maybe I just built a brand new campaign over the last couple of weeks and I'm now ready to go into production. It's only 1:46 my time. I'm going to send this thing out, and I can send an immediate alert to those recipients and notify them that, hey, this campaign is out here. You can go ahead and start working on it. And then most likely, I think Laurel talked about it, was setting up some of these reminder emails and things where every day it's going to come out, and set it up to be where you send out those friendly reminders of, I've got X amount of tasks or modules and things to complete. And it'll even go through, might be hard to see on that screenshot, but in the bottom left there, it's going to start working you through how many campaigns and assignments do I have, how many are potentially at risk, or are there anything that are already overdue, and I definitely need to get on that in the next business day or two to try and achieve that timeline. Another nice piece of this is, in our world, we always like to either try and force feed information via email, or you can always have go right to your favorite or something that you've saved or bookmarked URL address. This email will actually take you right to that URL and get you right into the rivets. And from there, you've got different things from inboxes, dashboards, and I'll show you these last couple of slides here in a minute. But really kind of neat to see what that looks like and what that functionality does, again, behind the scenes without you having to think about anything. So now the Rivet Inbox. So I am that recipient. I've just been assigned a campaign. I click on that. Now, maybe in this example, I'm not. Maybe I'm somebody that's had a campaign for a little bit, because you see one of those, the things that jump out, right? Red means warning or danger, or hey, make your eyes go here. So you'll notice that like that third or fourth module kind of in the middle there has kind of a red overdue task. So hopefully that does gather your attention, and maybe I'll click on that set of modules or tasks in order to complete it because I'm outside my timeline and really need to get to that one sooner than later, right? But it really is kind of easy. Upper right-hand corner, it'll tell you approximately how much time it's going to take, and that's something that, if this was Laurel's example, GNC would define how long they think this entire campaign is going to take. The module that I'm on right now is just overview and instructions. They say it might take 5 minutes to do, and it's due on November 20th of 2021. So you can kind of see that right there, it's jumping out at you and telling you how long it's going to take and when it needs to be done, which is kind of nice. And then it'll just walk you through each of the different sets of modules, tasks, questions, and some of them can be open text like an address. I got to just type it in because everybody's address is different, to radial buttons where I select certain, maybe am I giving them only a net 30, net 60, net 90? They're just choosing one of those, and the Rivet system will capture all that, and you'll see in a minute how it can be available for the creator of this campaign to see on the back end and share with teams very easily. Some of the things that I like about this, we're actually using this, as a Traverse account manager myself, we're using this as we implement new customers on the Traverse platform. Some of the things that we really like is business setup sheet can be very big and daunting, is being able to delegate tasks, right? So we ask a lot of questions, and some of them are very specific about EDI, very specific about different aspects of the business. And my main point person was able to delegate these tasks, and the system will help send those emails and basically what we just saw on the previous screens, it'll help manage that process for you. So I need an EDI expert to help answer these. What's kind of fun though is you can say, but I still want to be as the main point person. I still want to look at that information before it gets submitted back to the creator of this campaign, or back to GNC in that example. I just want to lay my eyes on it and approve it. So I know I sent it to EDI, they're the experts. I'm just going to look and make sure that every button or every question was completed, and then I can approve it and basically submit it for review on, I'm going to continue to use this because it's really easy, the GNC example. So Laurel or Marty would be able to review those on the back end. Duration, I already mentioned, kind of how long things are going to take and assigning a different assignment date, and just really kind of neat the way that that all falls together. So once you get there, the Rivet board, this is kind of looking back again. So if I was a GNC or if I was somebody that created these campaigns, so now instead of being the recipient of it, I'm back in the seat of the creator of those campaigns. There's a really nice Rivet board. So similarly to a vendor going in and seeing their inbox and tasks, this is where in the case of GNC, a retailer could be looking at, hey, how are things going with all the different campaigns? So we just heard about 4 of them from GNC, and it sounds like they got several more in the hopper or forthcoming. So it's nice to be able to jump in as a Marty, as a Laurel, and top portion of this is really just giving me, how are all my current campaigns behaving? In this case, I've got 70% or 11 of the 16 completed. Looks like I've got more assignments than I do total campaigns. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? Because a campaign won't be complete, or a portion of it won't be complete until I've answered all the questions. So I might have 8 questions out of 10 in a module done, and I just got to finish those last 2, and then it'll mark it as a completed campaign. So you can kind of see a little bit more high level and a little more granular. This one's telling me that I've got 3 assignments that are overdue, right? So I guess there are reminder emails and things that are being sent. This is one where maybe I do, if I'm a Laurel, maybe I do look at this, a couple times throughout the week, and I got to figure out where those 4% are and what tasks it is. And maybe this actually requires a phone call or something and a little bit further follow up to make sure that these get completed or done. Hopefully all the reminders and the system's taking care of it, but there is that fail safe, hey, who's really missing it here, and make sure that that gets resolved. Overdue assignments at risk, you can see the top portion is global. Second portion is by each of those campaigns, you get to see kind of its own high level and how is it behaving. So I've got just 1 or 2 more slides kind of on the back end here, and kind of turn it over because I want to leave a few minutes for polling questions. So last little bit, notifications. You guys have seen automation. Where can I build in things that just work on your own behalf without having to think continuously along the way? There's kind of a notification box. This is where I could potentially, as a GNC builder of this campaign, I can say I want to set 1 or 2 levels of approval. Maybe it's because the payment terms or freight terms of prepaid versus collect, I want to look at it and actually approve it. And if I look at it and, hey, this isn't what we talked about, you can actually reject a task and the system will send it back to the recipient, and they've got a chance to, you can put a little blurb in there along with it and say, hey, this wasn't quite what we had negotiated. Can you please go back and make this adjustment and resubmit it to me? And this approval process can allow that to go back and forth. And it's really slick. I've used it a number of times, works very well. But I just like the fact that you don't lose an email somewhere. This is going to be that repository for, maybe it's not true legal documentation, but boy, it's pretty darn close. And I like to have one spot that both, vendor and or retailer in this case would be able to house and see that information. And that's pretty much stamped official. Once they submit it and complete it and we go through and approve it, it is pretty much locked in, and I can always go back and reference that if there are questions down the road. Last 1 or 2 slides. Once a campaign is done and I've seen it, I've done my approvals, and I'm like, okay, this thing is completely where it needs to be. You can also configure up front to have certain key players receive a report, whether it's back to the vendor, back to your internal teams, maybe back to a merchant partner, and send those automatic alerts out saying, hey, this campaign or these modules have been completed, and guess what? You actually get to see what that looks like on the back end, and I can click on that PDF or I can convert it to an HTML or Excel form, and this is basically the answer to those questions. So what are my new store discounts? What are those freight terms? All that kind of good stuff. You'll see it spit out here, whether it was selecting from a radio button or free form text. So with that, I tried to do my best to keep my 15 minutes a little under. Richard, I'm going to turn it back to you, sir.
Thank you, Kip. And let us dispense with the last poll survey because we just have 5 minutes left. If you could just kind of go to the business value slide. I just want to make 1 point, and then I want to open it up for the final questions. If you could skip past that, go to the business value. Something I wanted to share, I recently attended the CSCMP conference in Atlanta and had a survey conducted with a bunch of senior executives by Auburn University. And they said one of their biggest challenges going forward is adapt to a changing workforce. First thing you think of is not enough warehouse workers, right? Now, that wasn't the concern. It was senior management that was the concern. Another piece was remote work. It's here to stay. The days of the leaning over the cubicle wall to get the TPS reports, those are probably gone as well too. And the third piece was millennials. These folks are coming out of college and are loaded with tools that focus on analytics, and they don't want to do data entry like probably I did way back when. So the rest of the business value is, I'll let you peruse that. There's also a resource page in the deck that Patty's going to send out as well. Patty, I think we had a few questions. Could you go ahead and tee those up, please?
Yes, of course, I'd be glad to. And if anybody else has any questions, if you could put them into the Dropbox in the control panel in the questions section. So the first one is Laurel and Marty, directed to you. How long did it take you to get up and running on the implemented use cases that you spoke about today?
Actually, it depends on the complexity of the use case. So you can see that we had several different cases. The RTV, even though it was the third one we did and implemented, it was probably the quickest from initial concept to launching. I think it took less than a month to actually put everything together. The vendor onboarding obviously is going to take a lot longer, but we've been working on that one, probably just basically documenting out the steps is taking us about a month and a half. So we know that depending on what you need to get done and what it involves and how many groups it involves, depends on how long it's going to take. But it's totally driven by you and the resources, if you need resources from Traverse. One thing I will tell you is also Laurel created the RTV program herself using Rivet. So even though Rivet is you can get them to do it, you can learn how to do it, and then once you learn how to do it, you can build your own campaigns.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marty. Second question to Richard. What is the cost of Rivet?
Okay, didn't see that coming. I can tell you, I can give you some parameters on how it costs. First of all, let me start how we don't price it. That's by per user. Okay, there's so many applications out there where you pay a per user fee for the year, whether you use it or not. We price based upon campaigns, and so vendor onboarding would be a campaign. And if you have 100 vendors, we price it based upon that campaign, and the same for the other use cases that Marty and team used. If you'd like more specific pricing, please either reach out to myself, or you've got Barry Garvin's email at the bottom as well too.
Thank you, Marty. And another question to you. How did you handle training internally on the Rivet system?
Oh, I'll hand that over to Laurel, because Laurel's been driving that with all the groups.
Really, it's a whole lot of me sharing my screen and going through it, going through the campaign first as just a walkthrough where I'm just showing it to them, and then secondly, getting everyone into a call and spending an hour and a half or so just working through it with everyone and give everyone a chance to share their screen and do their little part of the process. So I try to do it hands-on because I feel like that's the only way you really learn something like that. So
Laurel, how has adoption been for the users?
Pretty good. I mean, they're pretty good. It varies by user, but like I said before, the vendors have picked up on it really, really well. And I've only had like a couple of internal users that have been having trouble getting the hang of it. So it's been pretty good.
And a follow-up question, Laurel. Did you create a user manual for internal use or external?
I did for the vendors. I do not have them done yet for the internal groups, but it's on the to-do list.
Thank you.
Keep giving her more campaigns to create, so it's hard for her to get the user manuals.
So much that you can do, yes. All right. Well, I see that we are at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, so I'm afraid that we are out of time for any additional questions. However, the contact information for our speakers is on the screen right now, and I will send out an email. On behalf of RVCF and Traverse Systems, we would like to thank you for attending today's webinar. We will send a link to the on-demand version of this webinar following our program once that file is available. And if you have any future questions, please feel free to reach out, particularly to Richard at rwilhelm@traversesystems.com. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Everybody.
presenters.